Hello. I wanted to pass along B.F. Westcott's comments on John 1:1. Now, this was the commentary that Westcott came out with in the English commentary, the Holy Bible with commentary, commonly called Cook's commentary when it came along. He also did a Greek version of the same with, of course, much of the same material. But in the Cook's commentary, which, by the way, was published in 1880, the same year, within the first year of C.S. Russell's efforts in the Watchtower, Westcott took care of what the text of John 1:1 said in a way that at the time seemed definitive, i.e. he was for a long time the most famous English commentary on the Gospel of John. So it's important that we note the timing of it, that all of this was common knowledge. Westcott was thought to give the definitive statement of it in 1880 for the generation that was served by the efforts of C.T. Russell, who was overturning the orthodoxy which Westcott was underlining here. So here are Westcott's comments. I'm not going to give you all of them, and excuse me if I stumble several times. This is 400 pages of material. It's actually, this particular binding is combining Westcott's efforts on John with a commentary on the book of Acts. 400 pages, double columns, small print. So if I fumble, please forgive me. Here's some of the comments Westcott makes on chapter 1, verse 1. And the subhead is, "The Word in His absolute eternal being." The first sentence of the Gospel offers a perfect example of the stately symmetry by which the whole narrative is marked. The three clauses of which it consists are set side by side. And what are the clauses? Well, let's read the verse as Westcott translates it. "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." The subject, the Word, is 3 times repeated, and the substantive verb 3 times occupies the same relative position. The symmetry of form corresponds with the exhaustiveness of the thought. The 3 clauses contain all that it is possible for man to realize as to the essential nature of the Word in relation to time and mode of being and character. He was 1 in the beginning. He was 2 with God. He was 3 God. At the same time, these 3 clauses answer to the 3 great moments of the incarnation of the Word declared in verse 14. He who was God became flesh. He who was with God tabernacled among us. He who was in the beginning became, in time that is. This revelation is the foundation of the whole Gospel of John. It sets aside the false notion that the Word became personal first at the time of creation or at the incarnation. The absolute, eternal, immanent relations of the persons of the Godhead furnish the basis for revelation. Because the Word was personally distinct from God and yet essentially God, he could make him known. Compare an interesting passage in Irenaeus, and he references here Irenaeus 2:30, verse 9. Then he takes up the phrase "in the beginning." The phrase carries back the thoughts of the reader to Genesis 1:1, which necessarily fixes the sense of the beginning. Here, as there, the beginning is the initial moment of time and creation. But there is this difference, that Moses dwells on that which starts from the point and traces the record of divine action from the beginning, while St. John lifts our thoughts beyond the beginning and dwells on that which was when time and with time finite being began its course. And then he asks us to compare Proverbs 8, verse 23. Already when God created the heaven and the earth, the Word was. The being of the Word is thus necessarily carried beyond the limits of time, though the preexistence of the Word is not definitely stated. That's a concession, but look what he does with it. The simple affirmation of existence in this connection suggests a loftier conception than that of preexistence, which is embarrassed by the idea of time. Preexistence, however, is affirmed in a different connection. Then he takes us to chapter 17, verse 5. This force of "in the beginning" is brought out by a comparison with the corresponding phrase in 1 John 1, verse 1, "from the beginning." The latter marks the activity of the Word in time from the initial point. The former emphasizes the existence of the Word at the initial point, and so before time. Then he takes up the force of the verb, the tense of the verb, "was." The verb "was" does not express a completed past, but rather a continuous state. The imperfect tense of the original suggests in this relation, as far as human language can do so, the notion of absolute supratemporal existence. In other words, the Word in his nature and in his creative capacity is beyond time. So how does he sum up this? This is his summary in the prologue as to the Word in his absolute eternal being. All of these truths are found in verse 1, says Westcott. 1, his existence beyond time. 2, his personal existence in active communion with God. And 3, his nature, God in essence. Next time we'll take up explicit statements of Westcott on what logos means in the context of John and in the context of Greek culture at that time, and in the context of Jewish thought on the Memra. I've linked to a series we did on the deity of Christ in the early church. Next time, the Logos in John.